Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to be doing our pick'em for Stage 3 of the StarLadder Budapest Major. If you would like a detailed kind of recap of Stage 2, I did just put out a video about that, less than a day ago. I mean, I'm pretty much posting these videos back to back on our off day between Stage 2 and Stage 3. So if you want kind of, just to recap the key storylines, things of that nature, definitely go check out that video if you don't mind. But very quickly, I'll just show you my pick'em. I was able to get 5 correct. I was able to get Navi here in the 3-0, and then I was able to get 3D Max, Liquid, Bait, and Paravision advancing. So just missed out in the 03s, obviously missed out in Aurora, didn't even make it through, which is kind of a crazy story. But again, if you want to check all that out, go check out my Stage 3 recap video, because I will just be focusing on Stage 3 in this one. Before I get into my Stage 3 pick'em though, if you have not already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. We did hit our 5,000 subscriber goal that we were trying to hit before the end of the year, which is incredibly awesome, and I do really appreciate all of your support out there for doing that. But we are just aiming to keep growing. So if you would not mind hitting subscribe, hitting a like, leaving a comment, all those things, that certainly does mean a lot as I continue to bring you some coverage here on the channel from the Major. And so, yeah, let's not waste any more time as we get straight into Stage 3. And so what I'm going to do here, just kind of talk about the teams that I know for sure will advance, or at least I believe they will for sure advance. And then once we get those teams, then we'll kind of choose who we want to go 3-0, and then we will pick our 0-3 teams, and then we'll kind of finish off the rest of the advancement teams. And, I mean, we're going to start this off pretty simple. I mean, Furia coming into this major is right now currently ranked #1 in the world, in my opinion. I believe they're also technically ranked #1 on HLTV and Valve at this point, and that is because they have won their last 3 tournaments in a row at Blast Rivals Hong Kong, IEM Chengdu, and, of course, the Thunderpick event that they played. And then after a top 8 at EPL, or prior to that EPL top 8, they had also won the Fissure Playground 2 event. So they've won 4 of the last 5 tournaments that they played, including 3 in a row. That's the most wins of any team in this last season, and they just look absolutely ferocious. I mean, they're beating all the top competition. They've beaten Vitality multiple times at this point, including 3-0 in a best-of-5 grand final, though the games were close, to be fair. Then they 3-1 Falcons in a best-of-5 grand final to win Blast Rivals Hong Kong, but they beat Vitality in a BO3 earlier in that tournament as well. Then at TWC, a little bit lighter competition, but they still beat Mongols and Aurora and Navi, some other teams kind of in the top 10. Had a closer best-of-5 against Navi that won all 5 maps, but hey, they still got the job done there. EPL, again, that was the one where they got top 8. That's where they lost to Vitality, actually, in a best-of-3 in the quarterfinals after beating Aurora earlier on and beating 3D Max. So did pretty well there. Then they won Fissure, and this is beating Liquid, G2. They beat Pain, Astralis, Falcons, and then they had the 3-2 over Mongols there. And then Cologne was the 5th, 6th place finish, which was their first event of the season. And really, Mouse has been the only team that's been able to beat them head-to-head consistently of the teams that are ranked kind of in the top 10. So other than that, they've been doing very, very well. They have a fantastic map pool. Like, they have incredible records on Overpass, Nuke, and Train, and I think that is a really nice group of maps to be strong on, because a team can only ban one of those 3, and those, particularly Overpass and Train, are some of the maps that are the least played for some teams, right? Some teams are, staying away from those. They also have been really solid recently on Inferno and Mirage, 8-4 in their last 12 games on both of those maps. So they have 5 really good maps, 3 elite maps, and that's where they could be the best team in the world currently on those 3 maps. It certainly could make that argument. They showed they actually could play Ancient whenever they beat Vitality in that best-of-5, but I think overall that's still a question mark, and you probably still wouldn't want to chance it against like a really good Ancient team. Their DusT 2 is like the only map where they've been kind of 50-50 on lately, but still very capable of playing it. Well-rounded map pool. Obviously, they have great talent. Kendara has been one of the best entry riflers and aggressive riflers on the CT side of the season. Has really revamped his career. Maladoy is obviously one of the best oppers in the world right now and plays an aggressive style and is very versatile. And doesn't seem to be faced by pressure despite being incredibly inexperienced. I mean, he is the Rookie of the Year by a substantial margin at this point. So you got that going for you. You got Quesarado, who's kind of that flex rifler, kind of doing a little bit of everything, and is continuing to play at a star level. Yuri has been a luxury fourth best player for this team. Sometimes even is like their second or third best fragger in the server. Plays his anchor roles and his, kind of flex rifle roles incredibly efficiently. And then Fallen calling very good Counter-Strike. They play a very nice mixed style of CS. They're capable of playing defaults and map control, but they're also capable of being very rapid, but very organized chaos, where their spacing and trading is very sharp. And yeah, they are just on a tear right now, in incredible form. Some people may wonder, did they peak too early? Unfortunately, you never really know until it happens, right? And so we can't really do that until we get the gift of hindsight, whether or not they peak too early. But certainly, even if they don't 3-0, they should be a lock to make the playoffs and probably one of the favorites to win the whole thing. Now, next to them is, of course, Vitality. And Vitality, while they obviously were the team of last season, they had the most dominant season of CS we've probably ever seen, just winning everything in front of them after the first tournament of the year. They won everything else after that, including the last major. They won the 37 best of 3 and best of 5s in a row. They had an incredible map pool, just incredible talent all around. And then this season, while they didn't win as much, obviously, they still placed top 4 or better in every single tournament that they played from Cologne all the way up until now. They also made the finals of 3 events, and they won one of them. That was, of course, EPL that they won with wins over Furia and Falcons, as well as beating G2 earlier in the event and Gamer Legion. So had a really good run there. Top 4 finish at Cologne. They got knocked out by Mouse, which is the team that they were constantly besting last season, when Mouse finally got the better of them at Cologne to knock them out of that tournament. Then Blast Bounty, they got knocked out by Mongols. EWC, they got knocked out by Falcons with the 4th place finish there. London was where they made the grand finals and lost to G2 in kind of stunning fashion. Best of 5, they went all 5 maps. Then they went to Chengdu. They lose in the grand finals to Furia 0-3, and then they lost to Falcons in the semis at the Hong Kong event for Blast Rivals. So they're kind of losing to different people, and it's really interesting because they're obviously still an elite team. They obviously still have a load of talent. Ziwu is still one of the best players in the world, an incredible hybrid, can op very effectively, but also can be an aggressive rifler that can make big plays. Rop's one of the best anchors and role players in the game right now. I do think Mezzi is a solid player in his own right. I think Flames is a solid aggressive rifler, particularly on the CT side. I will say his entry stats have actually been really poor this season in particular. He goes for a very high amount of opening attempts on the T side, which is what you'd expect from a guy like Flames, in that mid to high 20% range. But his success rate is amongst the lowest of a lot of the elite teams. Like, he's well below Yukendar. He's well below Kiyosuke. He's below Zershin. He's obviously well below Donk, who's well above 50% in his opening, conversions. I guess Mikaze is a bit of a wild card, and FaZe doesn't really have a true entry right now, so that's some spots where he kind of excels at against some of those teams. But even Elige, on Liquid, his conversion rate on T-side is still really high in his openings. So Flames is actually really kind of struggling in that regard, and that's been something that hasn't really been talked about very much, but it is kind of an issue. They also still have a solid map pool, but I would say their overpass is still up in the air a bit. They lost their last 5 out of 7 games on Train, and they're 5-5 in their last 10 on Nuke. So they've definitely seen some discrepancies in their map pool lately throughout the season, but they're still a team that has been consistently top 4 the entire season. They still won a tournament. They still made some finals. Outside of, Furia winning the 4, they really have been the next best team after Furia this season. So definitely, I imagine they're going to make it. Then we're going to throw Falcons in here because they have once again this season established themselves as a top 5 team in the world. Their first event with Kiyosuke at Cologne didn't go so hot, but then they went 3rd at EWC, beating Vitality in the 3rd place decider game. Fissure, they went top 4. They got knocked out by Furia, but they did have some wins over, some decent teams. Nothing too big, though. EPL, they came 2nd. They actually beat Esports twice at that event, and Navi, and 3D Max for losing to Vitality 0-3. Then Chengdu, they were able to beat Mouse in the 3rd place decider game to get the bronze there. They also beat Spirit earlier in the tournament. They lost to Furia once again. And then Blast Rivals, they beat Spirit again. They beat Vitality again, but then they lost to Furia. So Furia has just been kind of their nemesis. While Falcons has been the kind of counter to Spirit, it's like Furia has been the counter to Falcons because they're one of the few teams that has enough skilled players to kind of go toe-to-toe with them, alongside of Vitality also has that in spades as well. But outside of Furia, Falcons has been kind of tearing it up across all the other teams they've been playing against lately. And, again, outside of the initial Cologne match with Kiyosuke, they have been top 4 or better in every tournament that they've played, including the 2nd at EPL. And the 2nd at Hong Kong, so they made a couple of grand finals. They just don't have the win that a team like, Furia has 4 this season. Vitality obviously got their 1. Mongols had 1 before they lost Senzu. Spirit had 2 to kick off the season. Mouse is like the only other team really on here that doesn't have a win. Even G2 got a win, right? Of like kind of the top 10-ish teams that are, in this one. So they are definitely up there. They have a great map pool. They've been tearing it up on Ancient. They've been tearing it up on Mirage lately and Nuke lately as well. They've been a little bit iffy on Train and Inferno, but other than that, their map pool's been pretty solid. Munasee's in insane form right now as their opper. Also a very aggressive opper, so has loads of impact throughout the entire course of a round. Kiyosuke has definitely been, a guy who's been a great aggressive rifler for them, a great entry type player for them. Even plays kind of some off non-star roles and does pretty well with them, like Ramp on Nuke, for example, on the CT side. And, just been a great rookie. Unfortunately for him, Aldo exists, though. So, kind of kills the Rookie of the Year race that he was trying to go for. I think Kixon's calling good Counter-Strike. It actually frags pretty well for an IGL. Tessis is doing pretty well, considering that he's definitely playing roles he's not used to having played on previous teams, but he can definitely still have loads of impact. And, Nico, yeah, he's had a couple of stinkers. The big one is obviously, in some of these grand finals where he struggled, particularly in some of these games against Furia where he struggled. But he's obviously, playing different roles to make room for Kiyosuke, and he's always been prodded to be a very versatile rifler. And, yeah, maybe you're going to, harp on him about the big games, like in the playoffs or a grand final, where maybe he can kind of go a little bit missing, which has happened at some majors and some prestige events. But in a situation like this where we're not even in the playoffs yet, I don't think that's really going to be a factor, and I think he's still a guy who can definitely pop off. This team has loads of talent. They have a great run of results lately. They have a solid map pool, not as good as a Furia or a Vitality, but still pretty good. And I think there's no chance that we're going to see a repeat of Austin in this major. I think that they are definitely going to make the playoffs. There is no real doubt about it. Then the next team we got to talk about is Mousesports, because they are very clearly a consistent top 5 team in the world still. Right, they were basically just second fiddle to Vitality the entire first season. Had a lot of situations where they were, meeting Vitality in grand finals or playoff matches, and they just couldn't get past them, but they were still very, very strong. They came top 4 at the Blast Awesome Major, once again getting eliminated by Vitality after beating Spirit. Then Cologne, they came second, getting 0-3'd by Spirit, but actually finally conquering their demons against Vitality, also beat Furia in that event as well. And then they went top 4 at Blast Bounty, losing to Spirit. They went top 4 at Blast Open London, losing to Vitality. They came 3rd at EPL. This time they got beat by Falcons and then beat FaZe in 3rd place as Cider. They had beaten like Navi and, Gamer Legion. They had lost to Falcons twice actually at that tournament, as I already mentioned. Then Chengdu, they come 4th. They lose to Vitality and Falcons that event actually, but they also beat Vitality and Furia earlier on in the tournament. And this is indeed not the playoffs portion where Mouse gets their work done, and that's where they're going to be starting. They have great overall firepower. That's one of the big things for Mouse. I think that Zershin is still one of the best entry riflers in the world. I think Torzi's still a very solid opper that can also do a bit of rifling and can be a little bit flashy. He's not the most aggressive. Guys like Munaseeha Maldoy you'd put over him as far as aggression goes, but he's definitely more aggressive and assertive than someone like Shiro, although Shiro has the better numbers, and you could argue he's the better opper. And, I think Spinks is an incredible trade fragger and star CT player. I think Jimmy, even though he's not nearly as powerful as he used to be, he still can be solid and still does his roles okay. And then Brolin's not a bad fragger for an IGL, but the IGLing is probably where you're going to kind of worry about them, because their T-sides have been tough. Let's just be frank. That's one of the biggest weaknesses of this team. Outside of like Aurora and, Spirit, who kind of had their own issues sometimes on T-sides with their calling, this is kind of the next team in line that does face that issue. And, their map pool has been slipping. They've been awful on Ancient lately. They've been awful on Nuke lately. And their Mirage has also been very iffy the last 6 months, if we're being 100% honest. Their negative win rate on that map. So they have several weaknesses in the map pool outside of what they permaban. So that is a big issue for them. It seems like Inferno and DusT 2, and then like having an okay overpass and train are good for them. But again, they're very reliant on the CT sides to get the job done on those games. I still think they're going to make playoffs, but I do think once they face, some of the elite opposition, they're going to run into a little bit of trouble. The next team we're going to talk about is going to be Spirit. Now, Spirit obviously has had some struggles lately with this whole roster transition of bringing on Zwei and Tanir. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's very evident. But they were a team that did well early on in the season. They won Cologne. They won Blast Bounty. But then after that, tough at EWC, didn't make the main event of Blast Open London. Top 8 at EPL, getting knocked out by FaZe, which was kind of a rough look after beating G2 earlier. Then Chengdu, they also actually fall prey to Mongols, which was kind of wild considering the issues that Mongols have been having, losing Sinzu, bringing in the controls guy, and, some of the issues there. You just don't expect them to lose that game in that regard after they had already beaten Heroic and lost to Falcons. And then at Blast Rivals, they just lose to Falcons. They beat Mongols to get some revenge, but then lose to Vitality 1-2. But those were some closer games against Vitality. The 2 losses were games that went into either multiple overtimes or at least a single overtime, in the final 2 maps of that series. So, I think the thing is like, obviously you have Donk is just Donk, and he can just hard carry you through shit because he's the best aggressive rifler in the world and has been. He's just a total phenom. Shiro is a great complement as more of a passive opera that kind of juxtaposes himself to Donk's aggression. And the issue, though, is that sometimes the calling is just not as sharp. Like, I feel like their spacing and trading is just not as good as it had been in the past when the teams seem to be more on the same page. Like, these guys look a little bit lost at times. Like, they just don't connect together as well as when they had Zontix and Magix on the team, even if theoretically someone like Tenier is meant to be a more skilled player, and certainly looked like a star on Heroic and looked like another kind of guy that was popping off as one of the rookies of the year before Malador really asserted himself and Kiyosuke came along. He was right there next to PR and some of these other guys that were looking incredible for their first year, full year, at least in Tier 1 CS. But he has struggled to replicate that on Spirit thus far. With all of that said, I think they still have a pretty well-rounded map pool. I think Donk and Shiro are still guaranteed to perform at a high level. And if we can just get something a little bit better out of Tenier's way, it should be enough to get them through the playoffs. Now, once they get there, depending on who they go up against, a lot of things could happen. But I think that, again, they have one of the better map pools next to Furia and Vitality, in my opinion, right? I mean, they have had some roughness on Nuke lately, which used to be a power map for them, and their Mirage has been a little bit iffy, but they've been still really solid on Ancient, DusT 2, Overpass, and Train. It's just that they don't have as many reps with this full 5 on some of those maps is maybe the one thing you could call an issue. But yeah, I still think that they're guaranteed here. And at this point, this is where we have to kind of decide who do we want to put in the 2-3-0 column and who do we just want to keep here in the advance. And I think we'll bring up the simulator for this part. So if we're looking at the simulator, I mean, we obviously take into account initial matches, and I do think Na'Vi is not a bad shout in a BO1 in the form that they have looked in lately. It could happen, but Furia is certainly a favorite to win that, right? Then Vitality versus FaZe. If FaZe is up to their bullshit, they could maybe pull a BO1 off Vitality. I mean, remember, Vitality lost a BO1 to Legacy last Major in their opening game of the Major, so it can happen. It has happened, and FaZe just had a hot stage where Jacob actually started fragging better, and Twist and Frozen have continued to be in star form. And Vitality's had a couple of slips this season, so it could happen, right? Falcons over Bait. I like Falcons over Bait for sure, so I really like them when they're open to matchup. Mongols just not Mongols anymore without Sinzu and what they're going through. Yes, they should beat Imperial, but after that, I don't really expect much from them. Mouse over Paravision. This is probably one of the ones that has the most potential to be more lopsided, similarly to Falcons Bait. But, I mean, Paravision's been kind of hitting. And, I mean, with Mouse's T-side struggling, like, if Paravision gets a hot CT side against them, it could certainly give them a chance to upset there. Spirit over Liquid. I would say Spirit definitely should win this game, but there is a small chance that Liquid comes out flying and Spirit's still struggling. But I'm hoping with the time that Spirit has had since Blast Rivals to kind of maybe boot camp a bit before this major, that hopefully they'll be in better shape. But as you play it out, if the favorites do go through, which, I mean, the teams that we think had the best chance of going, all the 5 that we talked about, so Furia, Vitality, Falcons, Mouse, and then maybe Spirit, even if all that happens, Spirit will probably have to play Falcons. And that's where these two teams could kind of cancel each other out. Because I think in a BO1, it could go either way, in my opinion. Though Falcons seems to get the better of Spirit head-to-head lately, so you'd favor Falcons. But they could get the better of each other. And I think that's where it becomes hard to choose one of Falcons or Spirit to be 3-0. Because if all goes according to a plan and they win their BO1s, they'll likely play each other. And that is where things could get really tough in the 1-0. Meanwhile, if Furia skates through, they would likely play either 3D Max or Pain, depending on who wins that game. Either way, they're favored. And then they go into a BO3. And in the BO3, they're either playing Mouse or Mongols, where I think, Mouse actually has got the better of them head-to-head the last 2 BO3s they played against each other offline. So that could be an interesting wrinkle. I do think Fury, though, is just still the better team. I think that this is where they overcome that head-to-head if they do face each other there. Meanwhile, if everything goes according to plan with Vitality and Falcons, they could play each other BO3, and that could go either way, right? Falcons has gotten the better of them recently, but Vitality definitely could beat them, right? So I think it's actually kind of scary picking either of Spirit, Falcons, Vitality because of the likelihood of them having to play each other, whereas Furia seems to have the best road of kind of avoiding any of the heavy hitters if everything goes according to plan. Now, the moment that some crazy BO1s go wrong in the round 2, then it's all out the window anyway. But this just kind of gives us a little bit of something to work with, at least with initial matchups and, you know, how things fly. So then it boils down to, do I just want to put the teams that I think are best to just go ahead and advance and kind of expect that a banana peel could pop up and just lock them into advance? Or do I want to just say, hey, I think these are the two best teams, and so they probably should 3-0. So I'm going to go ahead and put Furia there to 3-0. I think they could do it. I do wonder a little bit about Vitality, where I think they could lose a best of 1. Falcons, I kind of like them to do it, but I mean, there's just a chance they could lose a BO1, right? Especially if they come up, there's a chance that these two teams could play against each other, and I really don't like that. I also just like Mouse to definitely make it through, so I really don't want to risk them 3-0 for sure. And so I think I'm going to risk Spirit. And the reason here is because there is a chance that Spirit just totally flop and have like a really poor tournament like they've had lately. I mean, again, we kind of talked about it. They, didn't do well at Blast Rivals. They lost to both the elite teams they played against there. Chengdu, they got knocked out by Mongols. And again, they didn't beat any elite teams there. EPL, they didn't really beat any elite teams there other than, I guess, technically G2. They got knocked out by fucking FaZe. They didn't even make the main event at Blast Open London. And EWC, they came dead last, losing to Heroic. Right now, I know that it has been a turbulent time with their roster and, figuring out roles and how to implement everyone and all that. But I just feel like either Spirit comes out the gate fucking swinging huge and they are able to then just 3-0 because they're just able to just murk everyone. Again, remember, their opening matchup is against Liquid, which I think they definitely could win and should win if they play up to their level. And then, yeah, maybe they do catch Falcons in a BO1 situation. They just pop off, even though Falcons has been kind of the hard counter to them. And then, the other thing for me is the only issue is if it plays out this way, there is a chance that they would play against Spirit. That's really the only issue. But in which case, I'm kind of covered because then whoever wins this, I have the guaranteed 3-0 on that. So that's kind of another way to look at it. I'm sacrificing a chance at getting both of them, but I have a good chance to at least get one of them correct, right? So that's kind of my thinking on this one. So that's how I'm going to leave it, and then I'm going to leave it that way. Now, as far as 0-3, I just kind of want to get this one out the way. I do think Imperial is the weakest team in this stage. I think they've been incredibly fortunate how they've gotten here. I mean, if you look at stage 1, the way that they were able to make through stage 1 was by beating Rare Atom, who went 0-3. Then they actually lost BO1 to FlyQuest and Fnatic in pretty one-sided fashion. And then their wins to get out where they beat Huns, who was an 0-3 candidate, and really the only reason why they didn't go 0-3 is because they were to beat Linvision, who did go 0-3. And then they beat Energy, who's using a stand-in. So it wasn't the most convincing advancement. They were doing it basically by going 3-2, and that was including losses to weaker teams and beating, teams that were going like 0-3 or near 0-3 or the stand situation, right? Then stage 2, well, they do a little bit better this time. Again, they beat Made in Brazil. Big fucking whoop. Made in Brazil went 0-3, as you can see here, right? So big whoop on that one. Then their next game, they lose to Navi. Then they beat Fnatic, and they beat M80. And obviously those teams didn't advance, M80 and Fnatic. They get knocked out. Fnatic won 3, and then M80 was the final game. They get knocked out by Passion UA. So their resume has just not been good this major, and they really weren't doing a whole lot of nothing before this major. Like, their results, even domestically, weren't that great coming into this. And so even though No Way and Try are playing really well, there's a chance they could catch a BO1 game. I mean, their first game is going to be against Mongols. And, that could happen in theory. Yes, I do understand that is like a banana peel that could happen. But, I mean, I just got to believe that, Blitz, 9-10, and, the others can hopefully get the job done. And Control's had a couple of matches where he's played well. So, I just got to bank on that. I'm sorry. I just don't see any other option, in my opinion. I think they're the clear weakest team. They're the clear weakest team, in my opinion. I just can't really go anywhere else other than that. Then as far as the other 0-3 teams go, Pain has had a lot of struggles, if we're honest. They didn't make the main event of Cologne. They didn't make the main event of Blast Bounty. They 9th to 12th at CAC. Masters Bucharest, they barely made playoffs, and then they got beat by Legacy pretty quick in the quarterfinals. And, I mean, Chengdu, they also went 9th to 12th, and that's including losing to Mongols who were using controls. And then at Blast Rivals Hong Kong, they did get a win over Tai Lu and Passion UA, but then they lost to Furia both times they played against them. And it's like, they have had their struggles. Now, do I think they could actually get a win at some point? I mean, I guess with them playing 3D Max first, it's definitely a winnable game, no doubt about it. But even if 3D Max wins, Passion UA is definitely a winnable game. It's just risky picking between these two teams because either one of them can win this game and wind up going 0-2. And then at that point, it's just like, who freaking knows? But I just really feel like Imperial is a good choice. After Imperial, though, it actually gets really difficult. It gets really difficult because, look, 3D Max is a team that I don't feel like is going to make playoffs. They just rarely do. So I'm not going to pick them to advance the playoffs, but I just don't think they're going to necessarily be an 0-3 team. I think Passion UA could be an 0-3 team. I mean, if we're honest, when we're talking about Passion UA, I mean, when I'm kind of looking at them, they did okay in Stage 2, but not great. Like, their wins were against Fnatic, M80, and Made in Brazil. They lost to FaZe and 3D Max. And, prior to that, they did beat Mongols at Blast Rivals Hong Kong, but that's not as big of a win as it used to be over Mongols back when they had Senzu still on the team. Then they won a smaller event like over Big and Eyeballers. Then they came second at Draculand, losing to OG, and then just beating a bunch of teams you never really heard of probably. So they don't really have a whole lot of international experience going for them. And I know there's a chance that Imperial and Passion UA will play each other. I feel like the loser of that game will likely go 0-3 in the end. So I think I will just do this. I think there is a chance one of these other teams can do it. Like, I think Pain has been very vulnerable. But yeah, I'm kind of struggling to think of, who else to put here. Again, I don't think 3D Max is going to make playoffs, but I think they could get a win. Like, they've always been able to find a way to kind of get a win here or there and like always kind of ride that 9th to 12th place kind of spot. I think Liquid did enough to at least say that they could get a win. Right? They could go 0-3. They could completely bomb out. I just doubt it. Paravision's played well enough, and Bates played well enough where I think they could definitely get wins at some point. FaZe has been way too sporadic, but I don't see them going 0-3. So that's where I'm going to kind of leave it. I think this is good. Now, as far as my teams that I think will go ahead and finish out our slots to advance, the first one I'm going to do is going to be Na'Vi. Now, with Na'Vi, the reason being is they obviously went 3-0 in the last stage and looked pretty sharp. And they did beat Bait as one of the wins to do it. Yeah, their BO1 wins weren't of crazy value, but, they beat Bait. I thought that was good. Yes, they had a rough Chengdu, I will admit, but they did pretty good at TWC. They, took Furia to 5 maps in the grand final. They beat Mongols back when Mongols still had their full 5, and they beat Aurora. So they beat some decent teams in the top 10 to get that second at TWC. EPL, they came top 8, getting knocked out by Mousesports, but they had beat Mongols, again, when they still had their full 5. They had beat Aurora with their full 5, so they're still beating some top 10-ish teams in the world. Yes, they had a loss of 3D Maxers and the Falcons, but overall still good. Then they won Star Series over like Passion UA, NIP, multiple games against them, 9. So, nothing crazy, but decent enough. And then Cologne, they actually came top 4, beating Mongols yet again, beating FaZe, beating NIP, had a really close loss to Mousesports, and then they lost to Spirit. So, I really, and then just, I don't know, I like it. Like, I think Bit has been in good form. I think Wonderful looked great with the Yacht this last stage. I think Ema's still doing pretty well. It's like a secondary entry type guy. Makate's a bit of a wild card. This is his first major, and, I am a little bit concerned about him. I just feel like the brain trust of Alexi B and Blade and the fact that we're seeing Bit playing very well, that we're seeing Wonderful do well enough. Like, yeah, in this stage he probably won't play as well, but he's doing okay enough, and Ema's doing okay enough. Like, I think they have enough firepower. Face it, I think they have more firepower than like a 3D Max or something like that. And I think that they're better off than Mongols, who are without their, Senzu, and Pain's been super, like, all over the fucking place. G2, they had the one win, but then not much outside of that. FaZe is just so hard to fucking gauge. And yeah, I like Na'Vi, man. Like, I think they're one of the stronger candidates, in my opinion, to advance. And so I am going to go ahead and put them through. Now, after that, I just don't like Mongols with their current situation. Pain has been too flaky for me. FaZe, who fucking knows, bro? They could be up to their bullshit and make it happen or not. G2 is an interesting one. And so that's kind of the next team we'll talk about a little bit, because G2 was a team that did win a tournament this season. And so you got to give them some props on that one at the very least. they are, a team that has talent for sure. Like, I think Heavy God is one of the better anchors in the world. Like, he might be second best after like a Rops or something like that. He's also incredibly versatile. He can play aggressive when need be. He's on some teams been more of an aggressive guy. So I think he's incredible. I think that Malbs is still doing his job as an entry, even though his overall fragging isn't as high as it was last year when he still was playing alongside Nico and Munisi and stuff like that. But I think he still does his entry job pretty well, and still is a skilled player and can do well. Maybe he has more time to get more comfortable with Hunter IGLing, and with Saul coaching, maybe he's helping find ways to help him implement him more. So I'm kind of banking on that a little bit. Sometimes he's an okay opper. He's not terrible. He's not amazing. He's just kind of good, Like, obviously he's going to be below Shiro. He's going to be below Model. He's going to be below ZU. He's going to be below Munisi. He's going to be below Torzy, but I think he can kind of play to a similar level of Wonderful or something like that and be okay. Right? I think Mattis has been pretty good for them so far. And I think Hunter is adapting to the IGL role pretty well. I've been seeing some good stuff here and there. And I think he's been fragging pretty well for an IGL, actually, too, if we're honest. And look, like, even they won Blast London against Vitality and Furia. Like, it's hard for me to overlook that. Yes, they didn't do nearly as well in some of the other events. Particularly EPL, not even making playoffs there was pretty tough, but they had a tough schedule, losing to Spirit and Vitality. The 3 max loss was kind of a rough one, but still, like, losing to Spirit and Vitality, I can't get too mad about that when it comes to EPL. When it comes to Chengdu, their losses were to Furia and Vitality as well. So it's just like, man, really tough schedule. And yeah, there's a chance they're going to play some of those teams here too, but I think that they can still ride by. And I think when you look at how they start, they play Passion UA first, and that should be a game that they could get. And then once they advance from there, when you're in the 1-0 pool, like, yeah, they probably lose to Vitality BO1, but it's not out of the question that they would lose that. But even if they go down, I think they could play Bait. I think that'd be a tough game. But even if they lose the Bait, then they get to play Pain, which I think that they do win. And then on the last day, just kind of depending, I think that they could make it through. Like, Navi would be a tough BO3, but it's possible, right? And, hell, maybe it doesn't even get to this point because Navi gets a win somewhere else to avoid this. Who knows, right? Then when it comes to the final team, I don't know, man. Like, I don't trust 3D Max. They just don't think they have the firepower. Paravision's been doing fantastic, but this is a major now. This is making a major playoff. This is a different caliber. Same with Bait. Like, they're kind of in the same boat where they've both done very well for themselves so far, but this is a different level, right? Liquid, I've seen too many discrepancies in their play to trust them. So then it becomes down to, like, can FaZe keep the magic rolling? Does Monkel still find a way to get the job done even without Zenzu, despite looking rough without him? I really think that the best bets for me are FaZe, Bait, Paravision. I think it comes down between those 3. I think it could be either one of them, on all honesty. When you look at the matchups, like, FaZe likely lose to Vitality, yes. But then when they come down here, I feel like it come down to this match. Like, this could actually really determine a lot, right? If FaZe does wind up winning this and they go up, even if they lose to Navi, they get to play Imperial, and then they maybe get to play Bait in a BO3, which I could go either way. So, I mean, I feel like Bait, it kind of lines up to what I'm saying. Like, it could be either one of them, to be honest. But I'm going to roll with FaZe. I'm going to roll with experience. I'm going to roll with bullshit. I'm going to say they're up to their bullshit. And so that is going to do it. We are locking it in, and hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, please, again, subscribe, like, comment, help the algorithm, help the channel grow, and we'll talk about Stage 3 after it happens.